Hello and welcome back to another episode of Stadium Showdown, your in-depth look at the future home of the Cleveland Browns. In this week's episode, we head down to Columbus for the House vote on the new budget, plus an exclusive interview with Cuyahoga County Executive Chris Ronayne, and we examine a new Senate bill, which would make the amount of money a team would potentially get from the state based off of their win percentage. But first, let's start in Columbus. The Ohio House voting on a new budget, and within it, potential funding for a new Browns stadium. 19's Dan DeRose was there.
Well, this is yet another major hurdle cleared by the Cleveland Browns and the Haslam Sports Group. The vote taking place here within the last hour. The vote was 60-39. Remember, this was for the biennium budget. A lot more than just the Browns' $600 million loan, but it did pass right along the party lines. Again, 60 affirmative, 39 against. There was some back and forth in the chambers. Republicans basically supporting this plan and Democrats not.
Anybody want to take bets on how many folks who are clapping, slapping the desk and cheering against this project and saying, please, please, please don't spend money on the largest economic development project in Ohio history. Don't spend that in my region. How many folks do you think are going to be taking selfies at the ribbon cutting? I think all of them.
And it's not a foregone conclusion, in your opinion?
No, not quite. I mean, I think the train has definitely left the station and it's speeding down the tracks. But you still have the Senate, and, you know, we'll see if the governor line item vetoes this part of the budget or if he keeps it in.
From here, the bill heads across the rotunda. The Senate will put it into their committees. The Senate will have to vote on this. Will they agree with the $600 million plan for the Browns will remain to be seen. Either way, a budget has to be on the governor's desk by June 30th. He can then line item veto anything in that budget. He does not like the plan of using $600 million in loans for the Browns, but if he vetoes it, it could come back here to the House. They would have to have a 3/5 majority to overrule the governor's veto. Not sure the Republicans have that, but again, that's a long way coming. In Columbus, Dan DeRose, 19 News.
And coming up after the break, we have an exclusive interview with Cuyahoga County Executive Chris Ronayne to see how he feels about the budget passing and the Browns Stadium funding clearing a major hurdle. Plus, the Cincinnati Bengals. They want in on some of that cash. We explain how that could affect the Browns. Welcome back. The Ohio House passing the budget was a major hurdle cleared for the Cleveland Browns, but it's become a pretty big roadblock for Cuyahoga County. 19's Colton Molesky sat down with Cuyahoga County Executive Chris Ronayne to hear what he had to say.
Well, thank you again so much for meeting with me. I kind of want to start here, though, first, instead of going with the recent stuff. Let's go back to your presser that you had last month.
Yep.
You had some very strong words. You had some impassioned arguments that you made.
Yep.
I know that Brook Park had some public statements that they made afterwards, as well as the Browns. Did you have anybody reach out to you personally after that?
Lots of people, most of them said, hey, it's making sense. We have to look out for the Cuyahoga County taxpayer. And when we rolled out some of the reality check, things like this come to mind. One, the Haslam Sports Group plan is predicated on 100% occupancy over 30 years, every game sold out and every parking spot sold out. In development, and I come from a development background, you've got to do some scenario planning. So we need to see what the mid-case scenario is and the worst-case scenario is too. But they've got this loaded up for the very best scenario that everything always stays the same for 30 years in Browns traffic down in Brook Park. You get down to some of the details of their financial plan. They want to use a bed tax, a % bed tax in an already highly bed taxed area, and they want to basically tax the downtown hotels to build their single-use stadium in Brook Park. We're not sure that dog's going to hunt. There's another thing that they've put into it, and that is a car rental tax, where they've been saying, well, this is a user tax for out-of-town tourists. Nope. The actual most regular user of a car rental in this town is a Cuyahoga County resident themselves, because when they have an accident, when they have an axle problem, when there's a car breakdown, they got to rent a car. So that's a charge put right back on us, and they want $6 a rental car in their pro forma. They want to charge you $6 a rental car on top of what is already one of the highest taxed rental car districts in the country. So you add it up, the extra taxes is really a burden on the residents. And when you look at it, the issue of how this thing is supported over time has very ambitious assumptions in its model. So what we did is we reality checked it, and we got a lot of people who called and said, thanks for looking out for us.
And speaking of that press conference, now that we fast forward a couple weeks, where are those conversations right now with the Browns, with the city, with Brook Park? Because obviously the county executive, not just Cleveland's executive. That's right. Where are the conversations now sitting at?
Well, we have a number of audiences. We've got our county residents first and foremost, and of course we have the city of Brook Park and the city of Cleveland. I have continued to be a proponent for the downtown plan, one that is doable financially, half the price of the Brook Park plan, not so much a burden then on the state of Ohio taxpayers as well, let alone Cuyahoga County taxpayers. I've been a proponent of the downtown plan, and I continue to say this is not Brook Park versus Cleveland. This is about everybody's downtown. We've built 16 hotels in the downtown, getting ready for conventions as we did in 2016 and as we've done every year since, where the bed tax is up because visitors are showing up in the downtown. That helps restaurants, it helps retailers, it helps everybody to have a vibrant downtown. I keep saying to the Haslam Sports Group, the burden of proof is on you why you have to take the historic Cleveland Browns out of downtown, off the lakefront, in the place that we've been playing football for 75 years in this town. Tell us why you got to move us out, and with it, we think, moving retails, restaurants, and hotels, and deflating the balloon of downtown that's already a bit precarious in the post-COVID office market, where you're not seeing as many office workers. So what's driving downtowns today? Entertainment and residents. What are you seeing in the resurgence of places like Detroit, Minneapolis, Indianapolis? You're seeing a downtown resurgence of residents and entertainment. Just when we realize we are actually a national model with 3 sports teams and 3 facilities within walking distance that Detroit replicated when they brought the Pistons and the Tigers and the Red Wings back downtown together, they modeled after us. Why are we going a different way when we've become the national model for success in downtown stadium entertainment and the venues that support a vibrant downtown?
You mentioned the burden of proof is on the Browns. Since you had your presser kind of laying out all of this stuff, have you had anyone come up with a good counterpoint, whether that's Brook Park or the Browns?
No, when we've been out in Brook Park, we have not seen a financial model that works. We do see a financial model that works in downtown. And again, everybody's downtown. We see a there. It's roughly half the cost. The Haslams have been asking for overall $2.4 billion product in Brook Park, $1.2 billion downtown, $600 million in public subsidy versus $1.2 billion in public subsidy. Again, voters are already pretty stretched, right? Mm-hmm. And residents are stretched. And, even the ambition with the state of Ohio, we're watching what the House and Senate are doing down there, because maybe somebody at some point is going to say, like the governor has said, hey, we have 12 major sports venues in the cities across the state of Ohio. If we give $600 million to one, what are we going to do for the others? And that conversation, we just heard Hamilton County, Cincinnati, home of the Bengals, pop up. That's starting to weigh in on the legislatures.
Speaking of down in Columbus, they just had the vote in the House to pass the budget, which includes that $600 million for the Browns. Were you surprised by this because it was pushed through by Republicans, which dominate the House, or were you still disappointed that after some of the arguments you've made that still had that push behind that budget?
I think our message from Cuyahoga County is now reaching the State House. I think we've reached the governor, and I think we're beginning to reach legislators. And that message is, look, wait a minute. This is a risky venture, the Brook Park Dome, for Cuyahoga County residents, but it's also a risky venture for Ohio residents. You know, you're asking, and the model that the state of Ohio has put forth through the House budget is asking for essentially a bond that will have to be repaid on the business premise that the Haslams have put forth in Brook Park. And that assumes income tax and a lot of other taxes that you don't necessarily are going to come in at the high rates that they've said they will come in. So what have we seen? We saw at the House a little bit of a dissension in the ranks when the budget bill was finally voted on. We saw people to an amendment that was offered that there won't be any more infrastructure for public stadia. We actually saw that vote go down by only one vote. So you're seeing dissension in the House. We'll see what happens when it gets to the Senate. I think in the Senate, this is going to be deliberated through June 30th. And for us, we're going to keep making the message heard that, hey, it's a risk for Cuyahoga County to build something that isn't financially sustainable. And it's a risk also for Ohio residents. You know, if I'm in Youngstown, if I'm in Toledo, if I'm in Cincinnati or Columbus, I might concern myself with how state tax dollars are being used up here in Cleveland. You know, look, we feel that we want to have a fair share of the pie from the state of Ohio. But let's talk about what's fair, what's right, and what's supportable.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks,
again.
Colton.
I really appreciate
you. Thank you.
Now bringing in Brian Duffy here to talk us through, break down, I guess just honestly have a little discussion regarding the Cincinnati Bengals proposal and then kind of the way that this plays into the Cleveland Browns here. Just going to walk through a little bit what they're doing and why this is so vastly different than the Cleveland Browns, but the timing here is really hilarious. So the Cleveland Browns went to the state less than 24 hours, or excuse me, the Cincinnati Bengals went to the state less than 24 hours after the Browns had their budget approved through the House and said this is what they want to do. Increase the amount of seats they're going to have, more jumbotrons, things like that. All of this is going to be renovated, but it's going to stay an open-air stadium, and in fact, it's actually going to stay downtown, stay at the same spot, not going to be changing anything. You see, this is what they plan for the new one. It's going to basically be a little bit more laid out so they can afford to have more seats and then much more connected to the downtown area. Now, when we show this and when we look at this, Duff, you'll notice there's no roof on this.
Right.
There's no dome. They want to stay where they are. I just want to kind of go through really quickly here. The Browns couldn't have a different situation here. Cuyahoga County wants them to stay downtown. The Browns want to move. In this situation, the Bengals and Hamilton County are in agreement here and asking for far less. I guess, what could we see potentially, or what do you think we could see potentially as far as like the reaction from the state? Hey, we still want the money, but we're at least in agreement.
First of all, nobody should be surprised. Everybody's going to be getting in line. Every professional sports team in Ohio is getting in line right now to start thinking about how am I going to ask for my money, right? I mean, the Indians, the Cavaliers, why shouldn't they? The Blue Jackets, I mean, the Reds, everyone's going to be in line asking for money because they're going to give the Browns money, or at least we think they might, unless it gets line item vetoed. So I think the issue here is, and you know, I'm not taking sides on this because I don't know what the right thing to do is. I really don't. But the Haslams are putting up half the money.
Yeah.
We're not hearing the Browns, the owners of the Bengals,
right?
The Browns, who are the owners of the Bengals.
Yeah, it's a little confusing. Yeah, the Brown family, yes.
Right, putting up, you know, $1.2 billion here. So it's I mean, to put a roof on an existing stadium is almost impossible from what I understand. Do they have room there? That's what they say they can't do there. So I think that's the first thing. That's just my opinion.
Right.
Is that the Bengals Bengals aren't going to say, the Brown family is not going to say, listen, we're putting up $1.2 billion. They're never going to do that.
Notoriously, some of the cheapest owners in the NFL.
I was getting to that, but I'm glad you went right ahead and said they don't have that kind of money.
Yeah.
They own the Cincinnati Bengals. That's all they do. I mean, they're one of the. I mean, there's not very many owners like that. They're football people. Whereas the Haslams made billions and billions of dollars in the trucking industry.
Yeah, and then invested in.
So I think to me that's the big difference is the Haslams could go, here's $1.2 billion. So now, you guys just got to match that, So they've got some skin in the game where the Browns don't. So the Browns would have to go to the state and say, hey, we want, $3-4 billion to build a new dome stadium. I really think it's that simple.
That naturally brings to the last question here, which you mentioned at the beginning of this. Color me surprised that another sports team is trying to get this done. Like, this is shocking to no one. It is slightly hilarious that it's literally less than 24 hours.
I'm shocked that no one else has done it already.
Right. So it's clearly that this was going to happen. The thing that is, though, do you think the speed in which the Bengals did this could potentially affect the Senate vote? Because I think that there's going to be more discussions now. The Senate's supposed to be voting potentially in a couple of weeks. They're going to have a couple-week break, and then they would come back and I'll start the discussions. But a very valid argument now is we are starting a very slippery slope.
Yeah.
If you give the Browns money, you see the Bengals are already doing it. I could see this affecting that, or at least causing the discussion.
Yeah, I think so. I think you saw some cracks in the Republican caucus.
Oh, yeah.
When it comes to just handing this to the Browns. I will also say that the Haslams have been incredible donors to a lot of people in Senate leadership positions. I think that's important. I mean, our head would be in the sand if we didn't think that was important. So I think that will pass the Senate. I still think it will. I think there will be a lot of debate, and I think some of it will come because of what you've said. Now people are going to be getting in line, like this with their hands up.
Right.
So I think that's legitimate, but I think in the end, they'll do this, and then I think it's just going to come down to the governor and whether the line item veto comes out,
which would be really interesting.
Yeah.
To see.
He said it again just this week, right?
Yeah.
On a talk show. Or
he still doesn't like this idea.
Doesn't think it's the right thing.
So it's yet to be seen if he will fully see it through, but just interesting. Literally 24 hours later, the Bengals are like, all right, money, please. We'll see if it actually happens. Brian Duffy, thank you so much. Coming up after the break, we're going to be discussing a potential change to this. I talked about it earlier in the week about why the winning percentage of the team that wants the money could change if they actually get the money. But first, of course, if you want to view any of our previous episodes, go ahead, scan the QR code on your screen right now. Every single previous episode of Stadium Showdown right there at your fingertips. Welcome back. Should a team's winning percentage affect their availability to get funds from the public for a new stadium? One state senator thinks that absolutely should be the case. I'm going to pull up for you a look at how every single professional sports team in Ohio has performed over the last 5 years. Under a new Senate bill that has been proposed, 6 out of the 8 professional sports teams in the state of Ohio would qualify for public funding because they have winning records in 3 out of the last 5 seasons. The only 2 that would not qualify, the Cleveland Browns and the Columbus Blue Jackets. The idea behind this, make the teams fight hard to get the funding they want. Earlier this week, I spoke with the sponsor of this bill to hear why exactly he believes this is the way the state needs to handle funding these stadiums.
The bill would make it so that if a professional sports team and their owners are going to receive public money, that they have to have a winning record 3 of the last 5 years. So actually half the professional sports teams in Ohio would qualify right now, the other half would not. And basically, I mean, personally, I'm against public funding of any stadium projects that is going to an individual or a team that owns the projects. So if right now we have a budget crunch in Ohio. We have needs for lots of things, and spending $600 million giving it to the Browns when we're not fully funding public education, when we're cutting libraries, when the Speaker of the House says there's not enough money to have full-time breakfast and lunches to every student in public schools, that we don't have enough money to pay child care providers or mental health professionals. These are things that are much more important than a professional sports team who wants to build a dome stadium that's not in the city of Cleveland.
Yeah, many around here will potentially see this as the Do Not Give the Cleveland Browns or the Haslams Money Act. Is this specifically targeted against the Browns and the Haslams, or are you hoping that this would then deter in the future teams that are in a situation like the Browns to be asking for as much as they are?
Yes. I mean, this is for every team. I mean, the fact that our current Attorney General had editorial over the weekend on why public money shouldn't be spent on these projects. The fact that I agree with our current Attorney General, I don't agree with him on much at all, but I agree with him that if we give money to one team right now, it's going to lead to every other billionaire owner of a team to hold the state hostage and demand money. Again, I don't buy the fact that the benefits are going to outweigh the public money going into these stadiums or arenas or whatever they might be. So this is, I mean, the Haslam's other team happens to be here in Columbus. They would actually qualify under this bill because they've had a winning record 4 of the last 5 years. So this is not to pick out any individual or any ownership. This is to say, hey, wait a minute. I mean, if you want to be considered for public money, you have to have a winning product on the field. Oh, and by the way, too, what this bill does, if you leave the town, if you get public money and then leave the town, you have to pay all that money back to the entity that gave it to you. So the taxpayers of Ohio aren't going to be out any money if the billionaire owner decides, okay, I'm going to take this now. 10 years from now, I'm going to move the team somewhere else because I get a better deal. Well, if you do that, you have to pay all that money back to the entity that gave it to you.
And now's the time of our show to answer your questions. Let's get to that first one now here, asked courtesy of Brett Vincent. He wants to know how much taxpayer money has been wasted, he says wasted, so far by the mayor trying to fight the Browns moving. The Browns have basically been in and out of submitting different court filings over the last 2 months or so. They were actually supposed to be in court this week. That ended up being moved. So as of right now, it does not seem that they have hired any sort of outside counsel to aid in this. However, the action in the courts has been quite a bit, but at the same time, nothing at all. Again, they were supposed to be in court earlier this week, and then they weren't. So it's very much so yet to be seen whether or not they're going to be physically in court in the coming days. But this idea of at least lawyers handling this and being in and out of court and trying to make sure they can figure out a way around this, that's only going to escalate for the next couple of weeks because the judge needs to make a decision on the Modell law and needs to make a decision now. June 30th is the deadline. At least that's when we'll know for the full funding if the governor has signed on it. And our last question, courtesy of Corey Smith. How can a state offer $600 million for a stadium but take away from education? Now, I want to be clear. They're technically not taking the money away from anything. The money's not being taken away from education. The Browns are getting bonds that will be used to pay for the stadium. And then those bonds will be paid back through tax money, not directly from the Browns, but increased tax revenue from the stadium itself. So they're not taking away from education here, but they're not necessarily helping it either, right? They could do this same idea for things like education to help the system, but they're just not doing it. So very much so a very clear issue there. Many in the House believe that the funding should be going toward things like education, like housing, but it's just not. The Browns say that it will end up being worth it with the amount of money that comes into the state. It's yet to be determined if that is the case. All right, and of course, if you have any questions, head to our website, that's cleveland19.com, or scan the QR code on your screen right now. Love to hear from you all at home. Any aspect of the new stadium, We love to touch on it. We'd love to hear from all of you. Of course, go ahead, scan that QR code. And that's it for this latest episode of Stadium Showdown. Thanks so much for watching. Of course, we'll be back next week with the latest in the future home of the Cleveland Browns. For now, I'm Jeff Slauson with 19 News. Have a great day. We'll see you all next week.